Hi, everybody. It's Mrs. Verellen. I hope you guys are doing well. We're coming to the end of the year pretty much here of what we were going to be learning. So we have a couple more weeks and a couple more things. And this next part that I'm going to talk to you guys about is what we're going to talk about out of the 1970s. And it's actually the late 60s into the early 70s when we are going to discuss the Vietnam conflict. So I have some notes up for you guys to look at here. Just with how the Vietnam War started. And basically, it was what happened with the Geneva Convention after World War II. And so, just like we talked about with Korea, it's very similar. Vietnam was separated into two countries, and you guys can see here Ho Chi Minh was the leader of North Vietnam, and they had a communist regime. Ngo Dinh Diem was the leader of South Vietnam, and he created a republic with the United States supports. So obviously in this instance, again, just like in Korea, we were trying to keep the south part of Vietnam free from communist intervention. So the problems, well, Diem had a lot of problems that you guys can see here. He did not have enough support. He imprisoned people that he didn't like and people that went against his government. He put his family members into the policymaking positions. And basically, the government took that aid, the funding that the United States sent them, and they used it for illegal purposes. They kept it for themselves. And one of the largest things was just this religious difference between the two. He was Catholic in a largely Buddhist territory. And so he was imposing upon them, Catholic holidays. And a lot of the Buddhist citizens didn't feel like he was respecting their religion a lot. And so making them do that, they obviously butted heads for that purpose. And one of this is a famous picture of some of the monks. Buddhist monks would literally set themselves on fire and burn to death in response to the fact that Diem was enforcing these Catholic rules upon them. And you guys can kind of see in the background here, the monks are chanting and kind of encasing the roadway while the one monk in the center had lit himself on fire. And so a coup was staged. Okay, a coup, again, is an overthrow or an uprising. And basically, Diem was assassinated by a military leader in 1963. And in that time period, nobody really ruled the South. And so we were kind of watching over, but this is when the North really thought this was their opportunity to take advantage and go get the South. They did then gain the support of Southerners as well. Some people in the South supported the role of the North, and that was called the Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong were people who lived in the South but supported the North. So we were not fighting at all. And then the Gulf of Tonkin happened, okay? Some people could argue we shouldn't have been there, but we'll see, okay? You can see what you think. North Vietnam torpedo boats attacked one of our boats that was in international water. So it wasn't in territory that was owned by the Vietnamese, but it was close to North Vietnam. And so when President Johnson heard about this, he got Congress to pass a resolution that gave him control of what the U.S. did in Vietnam. So basically like giving him control of what happened, but we didn't declare war, okay? And at that point, the North Vietnamese kind of felt like that was an act of war. And so they put troops into South Vietnam. So they used this Ho Chi Minh Trail to get their troops and supplies. And you guys can see this on the map. This red area is where the Ho Chi Minh Trail was, where the North Vietnamese got stuff into South Vietnam, and they go through Laos and Cambodia, the neighboring countries. So Americans fought in Vietnam. You guys can see by 65, we had about 25,000 Americans. At the end of the year, it was 184,000. By 1968, it was 536,000. So we had just over 500,000 troops in South Vietnam. And we were continuing to be dropping bombs in North Vietnam. So we were really starting to fight in this area. And the conditions that they found themselves in were not very great. Most U.S. troops found it was very hard for them to fight because they felt like some of the South Vietnamese didn't even want them there. Or why were you there helping us? And so why were you risking your life to help a person that didn't necessarily want you to be there? But not all felt that way, obviously. But you couldn't trust a whole lot of people. Children peddling candy could have a grenade in them. They had to fight the jungle-like conditions, it was extremely hot, right? There's booby traps. There was jungle rot. Like he says, animal snares, landmines, grenades, all of them triggered by tripwires. You didn't know where you were safe. And so to try and help this, U.S. planes dropped chemicals to try and expose the undergrowth. So we used two different chemical agents at this time. We used Agent Orange and napalm. Agent Orange was this orange spray, obviously the reason why it's called, that was dropped on the jungle that would basically disintegrate the leaves in the land, exposing the Viet Cong. Okay, I'll talk about napalm in a